Gino Boncanno was well known to Detective Peter Forcey and Frank the Fixer. He'd been working on the fringes of organized crime in Montreal for decades, but he didn't have the connections of the more established Sicilian families of Montreal and New York. He avoided competing with their interests by limiting his criminal activity to second-tier crimes, like burglary and the protection racket. He was a small-time gangster who thought of himself as a gentleman among the ruffians in the business. He tried to be as polished and cultured as the major mafia bosses and not as crude and aggressive as the biker gangs working the same turf, but he used all the same tactics of intimidation and violence. Boncanno worked from a large private office at Cub Calabrese in Montreal North. The club was a conspicuously ostentatious ceramic brick and marble two-story building with bas-relief artwork around the high front entrance capped with a wrought-ironed enclosed balcony. Large windows with heavy red drapes framed the spacious reception halls and dining rooms on both floors. The club was a popular venue for family functions and events, especially the extravagant Italian wedding receptions that took place there regularly. Boncanno's office was off a large hallway that connected the private Calabrese Club facilities to the Luna Rosa restaurant, which opened on the opposite street. Boncanno was in his office the same afternoon as Frank was having a beer on St. Catherine Street. He was sitting at his desk and shaking his finger at the large man, Vito D'Alessandro, standing in front of him. D'Alessandro had the overpowering size advantage, but he looked sheepish and intimidated by the angry red-faced Italian raging at him. Boncanno sat with his feet crossed and clamped tightly under his seat. He wore a three-piece suit with a white shirt and red tie that all looked uncomfortably tight on his round figure. His large bald head was fringed with white hair, but it was no halo. "Damn it, Vito, we need to be tougher on these guys. They're not taking us seriously. You're letting them off too easy." His fist pounded the desktop. "They should be afraid for their lives. Then they'll find a way to pay." He sat back and collected himself. "Okay, bring him in and we'll see he gets the message." Vito went to the side door of Boncanno's office and opened up to wave in another heavy-set bodyguard who was gripping the arm of a small, curly-haired man with his suit jacket pulled askew. The bodyguard marched him into his office, grabbed a straight-backed wooden chair from against the wall, sat it in front of Boncanno's desk, and slammed the man down into it. Vito came up beside the chair and placed his left hand on the man's shoulder, holding him in place. Boncanno looked at the small, sweating man and slowly shook his head. "My friend," he said, "we had an understanding. You're supposed to pay me every week. Now you're whining you don't have the money, so I haven't been paid for 2 weeks. You know, this is not acceptable." The man put his hands together and stammered, But I just cannot pay. Maybe next week. I have no money and no one to help me. Maybe next week." "But your problem has become my problem. And you know that if I don't get my money, I have to take a pound of flesh, right? Like it says in the Bible. Please, just another week. I'll find the money." "No," Boncanno shook his head. "You said that last week." He looked up at Vito and nodded. Vito slammed his right fist into the man's face that knocked him backwards onto the floor. The man rolled over onto his hands and knees beside the chair, lying sideways, and blood dripped from his mouth and nose. "Not on my carpet!" screamed Boncanno. "Get him out of here!" Vito grabbed the man by the back of his suit jacket and pulled him upright, swiping the blood off the carpet with his hand and wiping it on the man's chest. The other bodyguard placed the chair quickly back against the wall and gave the carpet another wipe with his white handkerchief. The two heavies dragged the man out and closed the door quietly behind them. Gino took out his own handkerchief to wipe his brow and went back to leafing through the papers on his desk. About 30 minutes later, he heard a light tap-tap, and the door was held open by another burly man for a dark-haired boy in a school uniform. The boy looked in. "Hello, Papa." Boncanno got up and opened his arms to the boy. He leaned forward and gave him a hug, held him by the shoulders and kissed him on both cheeks before lifting him up onto the desk, where he sat with his legs crossed and hands gripping the edge. Gino sat down and rolled his chair back to look at his son. "How was school today, Antonio?" Okay. "And what did you learn today, my beautiful son?" The boy paused, looking down and swinging his feet. He replied in a small voice. "I learned I don't like Lisa Henderson." "Oh, why don't you like her, Antonio?" Still looking down, he hesitated before replying. "She said I'm a fat wop, but don't touch me." He jerked his hand off the desk and pulled it to his chest with a pout. like Lisa Henderson had done. Gino's own memory of schoolboy incidents hit him like a punch in the gut. Don't worry about it, Antonio. She's just mean, stupid little girl. She's jealous she's not as smart as you. Good-looking Italian like you. He patted his son's knee and looked into Antonio's eyes. Did you try to touch her? Antonio looked up quickly. I just wanted to hold her hand during the fire drill. We were supposed to walk out 2 by 2. Then quietly again, I thought I liked her. Horny little toad, thought Gino. His son was already showing signs of becoming the hot-blooded Italian that he wanted him to be. He's only 10 years old. He smiled at his own memories of clumsy romantic adventures, though nothing much happened for him until high school. Aren't there any nice Italian girls at your class? Yeah, but they're all fat wops, too. Antonio! Gino stood and put his big hands firmly around his son's small shoulders. Don't you ever say that. We're Italian, not wops, and proud of it. And we stick up for each other like family. Even if we're not always nice to each other, he thought. Just remember to behave and do well at school. They'll all learn to show you some respect. And I know ways to teach them if I need to, Gino added silently to himself. You want Mama to speak to your teacher? No, Papa, it's okay. Antonio slipped off the desk and hugged his father around the waist. I love you, son. Go on home now, and I'll see you at dinner. As the boy left, Gino rolled his chair back up to his big desk and pulled forward his inbox full of letters. He looked up at the drape-covered windows, and his mind wandered back to his own past, then forward to the future for his son. His gaze came back to the papers on his desk. On top was a letter embossed with the emblem of La Ville de Montréal Nord, the East End suburb where the club was located. It was a personal invitation from the mayor to a fundraising event in 2 weeks. Gino then pulled out a more formal legal document from City Hall, explaining a zoning violation related to his private parking space in front of the Luna Rosa restaurant. A small donation and a word with the mayor will make that go away, he thought. Gino kept a low profile but maintained a friendly relationship with the local mayors and a few city councilors to avoid any unpleasant surprises. Timely gifts and donations kept them from any interference with his business. He also quietly cultivated mutually beneficial arrangements with a few friendly cops to keep their interference to a minimum. Detective Pierre Forcey was one of those cops.